There was a time when many believed that sitting at these controls meant you were sick of life. This aircraft was called the Widowmaker, and the saying, "one a day in Tampa Bay," became common. Despite its reputation as a pilot killer and 4 official inquiries about canceling the project, the plane outlasted those doubts and achieved an unparalleled safety record. The Martin B-26 should be remembered not for its early reputation, but for proving itself as the top medium bomber of its era, the Marauder. Its first flight took place on November 25, 1940, a sleek, modern aircraft. Just over 9 years earlier, on April 29, 1931, the U.S. saw its first monowing bomber take flight. The Boeing B-9, with a 4-person crew in open cockpits, could carry around 2,000 pounds of bombs over a 495-mile range. Its cruising speed was 130 miles per hour, with a top speed of 165, 50 miles per hour faster than the biplanes it replaced. Boeing's metal monoplane was the predecessor to World War II's bombers, though it was never mass-produced. In 1932, the U.S., supported by most nations at the World's Disarmament Conference, proposed abolishing bombing planes. Even as these hopes were voiced, the Martin Company was developing a bomber that would surpass the B-9. Meanwhile, Nazism was growing in Germany, Mussolini had been in power for 8 years, and Japan was eyeing empire building. The new Martin bomber, the B-10, featured an enclosed crew, a rotating turret, flaps, braked main wheels, and a variable pitch propeller. It housed its bombs internally and could carry 2,200 pounds at 213 miles per hour, faster than the fighters of its time. The B-10 appears strikingly modern today, while the B-9 seems part of a bygone era, though only about a year separated their first flights. The B-10s were designed to operate in extreme conditions, reflecting the growing awareness of the need for airplanes to be ready for full-scale war. When the first B-10s appeared, they were a stunning blend of cutting-edge technology, incorporating the latest ideas, from drag reduction in their design to the strategic potential of bombing. As with all breakthroughs, they sent the world's designers scrambling back to their drawing boards. For a time, it was the most advanced bomber in existence, and the Martin Company was rightfully proud. Martin-built bombers had long been their motto, and building the world's best felt like a natural fit. Various engines powered different models, and there were numerous adaptations of the basic design, including a floatplane version to attract Navy interest. Yet, despite breaking new ground, the mighty B-10 was outdated by the time war began. Although later models could reach speeds of 260 miles per hour with a range of over 2,000 miles, by 1938, the Boeing B-17, capable of carrying 4,000 pounds of bombs, had already surpassed it. The B-10 was lightly armed and carried a moderate load, so it's more fitting to compare Martin's plane to the twin-engine bomber it replaced, which was still in use at the start of the war. The Douglas B-18 had been the runner-up in the competition against the B-17, but due to economic reasons, it secured the majority of orders in the following years. Its performance figures, while better than the B-10's, declined after modifications to increase armor and range, with the top speed reduced to just 215 miles per hour and a smaller bomb load and range than its predecessor. Neither could have handled World War II combat, as they lacked the bomb load, performance, and defensive armament of their European counterparts. Meanwhile, the U.S. had no effective medium bomber available. One failed submission from the Army's 1938 search for a twin-engine attack bomber was the Martin Maryland, which was later sold to France and Britain and evolved in 1940 under British specifications into the Baltimore. Remaining in production until 1944, it saw action in the Mediterranean. Designed 6 years after the B-18 and with lessons from the war, the Baltimore, like the Maryland, had a speed exceeding 300 miles per hour, carried around 1,000 pounds of bombs, and featured powerful forward-firing guns. It was an excellent light attack bomber, though it never found much favor with the U.S. Army. While the Maryland and later the Baltimore were being accepted in Europe, U.S. planners issued a specification in January 1939 for a new medium bomber, emphasizing high speed, long range, and a 2,000-pound bomb load. Absent from the specifications was any mention of wing loading, which implied the plane would have a high wing load along with high takeoff and landing speeds. Essentially, they sought an aircraft that, while sharing performance and size traits with the Baltimore, would carry twice the bombs and double the crew over a longer distance. With war looming, urgency was key, and the extreme parameters reflected the global conflicts and needs at hand. The goal was to push technological boundaries, not merely catch up, but to surpass, regaining the lead once held by the B-10 and complementing the excellent heavy bombers already in use and under development. Martin's Peyton Magruder designed a streamlined, cigar-shaped aircraft with the smallest practical wings and powerful engines, creating a plane that immediately looked right. With a 5-man crew, navigator, pilot, bomb aimer, and 2 gunners, it could carry 3,000 pounds of bombs at 315 miles per hour. Despite carrying 3 times the Baltimore's load, its dimensions were only marginally larger, and its projected performance made it a clear winner in the competition. With the pressing international situation and Martin's reliable reputation, the Army ordered the plane directly from the drawing board. No prototypes were built. The first plane produced would be the first deployed, and 201 were ordered in September 1939. Established in 1909, the company had built a strong reputation and skilled workforce. However, the hand construction usually expected for prototypes wasn't feasible. Mass production processes had to be developed swiftly. The new planes were first flown on November 25, 1940, and entered service in February 1941. Like the B-10, they represented the cutting edge of aviation, with over 20 innovative features, though not as originally designed. The plane's weight had increased, bringing the gross weight to 27,000 pounds, which led to a high wing loading of 53.2 pounds per square foot. These figures, as we will see, would continue to rise. The Marauder was a sturdy aircraft with a semi-monocoque fuselage built in 3 sections. Despite issues with some components, Like the Curtiss electrically operated variable pitch propellers, the construction quality at Martin remained top-notch. As the first B-26s were being assembled, engineers worked closely with factory workers refining the design. The crew size increased to 7, adding a second pilot and a radio operator, while orders for the plane continued to grow. With the British still having Baltimores built and the Navy purchasing flying boats, additional factory space was needed, leading to the construction of a new plant in Omaha to boost production. The Marauder featured two 50 caliber guns in the first power-operated dorsal turret on an American bomber, as well as a hand-operated tail gun. A 30 caliber gun was mounted in the bombardier's nose cone. However, as with all bombers, the guns, while effective in downing enemy aircraft, proved insufficient for defense. The hard lessons of needing fighter escorts or clear skies were still ahead. Over time, additional guns were added, with later Marauders carrying 11 50 caliber machine guns. The interior, packed with equipment, was purely functional. It may have housed 7 men for long missions, but it was far from comfortable. The Marauder was a war machine, stripped of any frills. Without prototypes or test aircraft for thorough evaluation, Martin proceeded directly to full production, with Marauders rolling off the assembly line in increasing numbers. Despite facing immense challenges, this steady production continued uninterrupted until the last B-26 was built in 1945. The first planes were assigned to the 22nd Bomb Group, a seasoned unit that had been together for 2 years. With minimal fanfare, the Marauder entered service with the group and was quickly deployed to the Pacific after Pearl Harbor, operating from Australia in the New Guinea campaign. Flying unescorted, long-range missions, the planes endured heavy punishment, proving their durability. Among the aircraft in combat with the 22nd was the third Marauder ever built, whose final mission ended in battle. With skilled pilots and strong unit cohesion, the 22nd became highly effective, eagerly embracing their new planes. As they gained combat experience, their admiration for the Marauder grew. They soon concluded that their planes were the best of their kind, and they weren't shy about voicing that opinion. The support of combat crews was crucial in the coming months as the Marauder began gaining a negative reputation back in the States. Pilots in training were dying in their B-26s. At MacDill Field in Florida, planes were crashing into the sea at a rate that led to the infamous rhyme, "one a day in Tampa Bay." Although the actual rate was closer to one a week, something had clearly gone wrong. Many quickly concluded that the project should be scrapped. The B-26 was a fast, high-performance aircraft that required well-trained pilots, but it was during training that it earned the nickname Flying Coffin. Despite selecting pilots after rigorous physical and aptitude testing, the Army struggled to adequately prepare them to fly the Marauder. Crashes continued, and the aircraft's small wings led to the nickname the Baltimore Whore, implying the plane had no visible means of support. While the Marauder was indeed heavily loaded, experienced pilots found it flew beautifully. The problem arose as the Air Force rapidly expanded to unprecedented size, with many new pilots and trainers lacking experience with twin-engine aircraft. Going from docile, forgiving trainers to the powerful and demanding Marauder was simply too much for many recruits. If not for the enthusiasm of the crews flying the Marauder in combat, the first board of inquiry might have scrapped the project in 1942. Adding to the praise from the Pacific was the Marauder's success in the North African campaigns. The British had received some of the new bombers, deemed them suitable for tactical use, and deployed them to the desert, where experienced crews were thrilled with their performance and wasted no time in spreading the word. As the fighting continued and German counterattacks weakened, more B-26s arrived in the theater and joined operations. They weren't just used as bombers, they intercepted slow-moving German Gigant transports over the sea, sending both the planes and their cargo to the depths below. Marauders harassed enemy front lines, disrupting supply lines, both at the front and across the Mediterranean. This stranglehold on resources eventually spelled the end of Axis resistance. While some German units fought to the bitter end, once the Allies gained control of the skies, the Afrika Korps couldn't sustain a defense. The jubilant French population celebrated their liberation with parades and dancing, marking the exit of Axis forces from Africa. German airfields were littered with wrecked Luftwaffe planes, standing as silent proof of the effectiveness of tactical bombing. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., inquiries into the accident rate and training continued, leading to changes in the Marauder, including a larger wing designed to reduce landing speed and wing loading. This change was clearly necessary, but what wasn't needed was for the gains from the larger wing to be offset by additional weight. Unfortunately, the new wing came with extra gun nacelles and other innovations, which added weight and left the aircraft with no real improvement in wing loading. The figure now stood at 58 pounds per square foot, with the plane weighing over 37,000 pounds. The test pilots were tasked with assessing how these changes affected the aircraft, particularly its takeoff and landing behavior. The testing yielded a consistent result. In the hands of experienced pilots, the B-26 performed well. Even with an extra 10,000 pounds beyond the designer's target, the Marauders won over their crews, providing strong validation of the design. The test pilots, highly skilled aviators by nature, recognized what the B-26 was intended to accomplish. This was no ordinary aircraft. It was a high-performance machine. The pilots became intimately familiar with the B-26, and notably, a few were retained at Wright-Patterson for general testing and use as chase planes. While debates about the bomber's safety continued in America, production remained deficient at the Martin plant, and more groups of B-26s were deployed. As longer-range aircraft took over in the Pacific, the center of Marauder operations shifted to Europe. Serious doubts arose again after the second mission flown from Britain turned disastrous, with the entire raid lost to flak, fighters, and a collision. However, as always, calm voices pointed to the plane's evident successes, and the Marauders remained in service, albeit used more conventionally and not at low levels for some time. Europe would become the theater where the B-26 ultimately proved its worth. Following the initial shock of losses, crews adapted to the demanding routines of combat, and the Marauder's reputation began to stabilize. It's not surprising in retrospect that it vindicated itself in battle. Martin had invested significant time and expertise into the design, despite the rush to production. Among the issues faced, weight increases had led to a series of accidents due to landing gear failures, prompting the strengthening of wheel struts. The Hudale bomber, towing its loaded B-26 strut, underwent extensive testing, with all components rigorously evaluated, though not always in such an unusual manner. Tests assessed various wheel angles, ensuring that the infamous wings were not gambles, but rather carefully calculated for safety and performance. If there had been any fundamental inadequacy, the plane wouldn't have been able to take off under the heavier loads that the Army expected. Initial calculations were validated. The B-26, while demanding, was both safe and reliable. A testing program holds little value if it only examines the most favorable conditions. Aircraft tests often continue until a part fails, revealing the limits of design, such as potential buckling of the wing surface. The treatment developed for the components in these laboratory settings was, to put it mildly, extreme. Every part of the plane represented a deliberate and logical choice, often involving some compromises, but the designer's commitment to excellent performance is clear from their decisions. With a small wing, the design placed significant demands on the pilot, particularly regarding training. The company made every effort to protect the crew, experimenting with various combinations of armored glass to withstand bullet impacts. However, no amount of design could shield the crew from the disastrous mix of a rapidly expanding air force and the B-26's intolerance for mishandling. Crashes involved not only trainee pilots, but also inexperienced ground crews and mechanics. Once units were fully trained and prepared for combat, accidents decreased rapidly, and the universal praise for the B-26 from its operators persisted. Moreover, under the newly formed 9th Air Force, the Marauder excelled in disrupting enemy communications. With fighter cover, the 8 B-26 groups of the 9th undertook medium-altitude, high-precision attacks. The increasingly overwhelmed Luftwaffe struggled to counter the precise assaults on communications throughout occupied territories. The momentum of Allied air dominance grew, critically impacting the Nazis' ability to resist invasion and contributing significantly to the war's outcome. The facility that produced the Marauder also had a legacy of crafting the first production bomber designed in the United States back in 1918. Martin was a company with a rich tradition and deep pride, and the criticism of the B-26 had taken a toll on them. Their highly skilled and valued workforce produced aircraft that were second to none, and the company's history of pioneering practical, efficient, and well-built planes was a significant asset. With petrol rationing in effect, Martin organized transport for its workforce, implementing carpooling and facilitating public transport options. The impact of the war was palpable at home, not only the carpools and reliance on public transport, but also in the influx of women into the workforce, reflecting the nation's commitment as many young men were sent to fight. Even the company's security force saw a shift, with women filling a substantial number of roles and wearing skirts as part of their uniforms. Looking every bit as organized as any group of recruits, these women were trained by Army drill instructors. Elaborate systems were established to recognize productivity and effort, serving as incentives and boosting collective morale. Each year, the factory opened its gates for a family day, drawing large crowds that showcased the company's size and community. In 1943, as Glenn Martin addressed the crowd, the worst of the Marauder's bad reputation was behind it. In a final effort to lower the landing speed, the incidence of the wing was adjusted. Although this change reduced the plane's speed to 270 miles per hour, it ultimately made the aircraft safer for less experienced pilots. The F and G models began entering service by the year's end. The employees and their families celebrated with a festive atmosphere, surrounded by the bombers displayed around them, a constant reminder of their contributions. Meanwhile, in Europe, the B-26s continued their missions with increasing efficiency as their experience grew. By the war's end, they had flown 129,943 operational sorties and dropped 169,382 tons of bombs, suffering a loss of only 911 aircraft in combat, a loss rate of less than 1%. In contrast, B-26 gunners were credited with shooting down 402 enemy aircraft. Alongside other Allied attack and medium bombers, the Marauders helped reduce Hitler's empire to isolated pockets with shattered communications. Often flying alongside various Allied aircraft, they relentlessly bombed German positions in the lead-up to the invasion and during the ensuing Allied blitzkrieg as the forces advanced toward Berlin. The Marauder gained favor among pilots from multiple nations. Not only were they used by British and American Army and Navy crews, but also by French, Australian, South African, Canadian, and Greek forces. As the model matured, variants for photography, target towing, and training emerged, making it the first Army Air Force aircraft to operate at night in the European theater. With widespread acceptance, the Marauders enjoyed a solid reputation, a long-awaited outcome achieved through hard work and dangerous missions. In Baltimore, the final chapter of the Marauders story was written as production ceased on March 13, 1945. Mr. Martin delivered a brief speech to a small gathering, and after a few photographs, the era of the B-26 concluded. The last aircraft, Tail End Charlie, was a TB-26G 25MA model, highlighting the many variants that had emerged since the original B-26 first flew 3.5 years earlier. Tail End Charlie was outfitted for target towing and training. Ironically, the second-to-last Marauder, named Middle River Stunt Jump and redesignated as the XB-26H, was involved in testing a new radical undercarriage for the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. This modified aircraft featured tandem main wheels retracting into the fuselage, with outrigger legs replacing the typical main gear in the engine nacelles. The fuselage required special strengthening to handle the landing loads of this innovative design. Testing was sometimes interrupted by gear failures during rigorous maneuvers, as the assembly comprised parts from both B-26s and B-17s. While the Middle River Stunt Jump contributed to preparations for the next generation of aircraft, the advent of jet engines rendered the entire World War II bomber inventory quickly outdated. Although some bombers found a second life in commercial aviation, the B-26, despite having regained favor among its crews, carried a lingering stigma. Coupled with its higher production costs compared to the North American Mitchell, the B-26 vanished from the scene with surprising abruptness. The B-26 Marauder's journey ended abruptly after the war, transforming from a fleet of thousands of aircraft to mere millions of aluminum ingots, scrapped even faster than they had been built. While the French operated the Marauder until 1947, the aircraft quickly faded from the skies. Despite its rugged design and ability to absorb damage, the Marauder played a relatively unsung yet crucial role in the war. It boasted the lowest loss rate of any U.S. bomber type in the European theater, but the price of victory was steep, paid in the lives of B-26 crew members. Many airmen credited the Marauder with their survival, and to this day, veterans argue passionately that their aircraft was the best of its kind. Though some may view their fervor as eccentric, it's undeniable that, with proper training for both flight and maintenance crews, as well as improved control among subcontractors, the B-26 transformed from its notorious beginnings to achieve a commendable record. Despite the early controversies, the Marauder has secured an honorable place among World War II's finest aircraft, remembered fondly by those who flew it and fought alongside it.
Air Force General Henry Harley Arnold writes in 1941, "A nation likely and able to win a war will enter it not only with the largest and most efficient Air Force, But behind that first line will stand the second line, the ability to maintain that superior strength in men and machines. 3 years later, the general's prophecy is now reality. On June 15, 1944, the first B-29s fly over mainland Japan. Unlike the Doolittle raid 2 years prior, this is a mission of epic proportions. That is because Boeing's Superfortress, the largest plane in the world, is designed for destruction, to grind the Japanese into a pulp, to bring them down to their knees once and for all. With wings spreading over 140 feet, a fuselage 98 feet long, and 4 engines each possessing 2,200 horsepower, the Superfortress is the envy of the entire world, a true symbol of American industrial power. Billions of dollars, combined with the blood, sweat, and tears of its creators, make this the most feared aircraft of the Second World War. For it is a weapon that doesn't start wars, it finishes them. For all its accolades and accomplishments, the Superfortress is America's biggest gamble of the war. A design so complicated, it is the most expensive risk for the United States government. A project that at times seems doomed for failure, and a project that requires a contingency plan. What to do if it never makes it out of the factories? Where to go if the people of Boeing cannot get the job done? This is the secret history behind one of aviation's greatest bombers, and how it almost never came to be. The what-if scenarios that America is prepared to take in order to get it off the ground and win the war raging in the Pacific. This is the race for the Superfortress. Even before America is officially involved in the Second World War, the B-29 is already envisioned. The need for long-range aircraft capable of rendering a decisive blow against any potential enemy is an urgent priority for visionary generals like Hap Arnold. For the next 2.5 years, as America remains officially neutral, they are behind the scenes, making extensive plans that include a barrage of new military projects, with a long-range bomber high on the list. Not until the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941 do the wheels begin to seriously move.
In the first few weeks of war, over 350 of the 525 combat planes we had in the Pacific area were destroyed. Over 1/4 of our total combat strength was lost. We suddenly found ourselves engaged in a mortal struggle with an enemy who could be counted on for nothing except bitter and fanatic opposition.
According to President Roosevelt, the United States was not particularly well prepared to engage in the war itself. In 1940, Roosevelt called for increased congressional appropriations for military spending, arguing that what the United States needed was to be producing 50,000 planes per year. In 1939, the U.S. produced fewer than 6,000 planes.
With the United States at war against both Japan and Germany, bombers are rushed into service. As one old soldier remarked, "Isn't it sad? During all the years since the First World War, we've had all the time in the world, but no money. Now we have all the money in the world, but no time." In this race against the clock, America comes together. Bombers are wheeled out of assembly lines in order to wreak havoc over Germany. Of notable distinction are Boeing's Flying Fortress and Consolidated's Liberator, where in Europe, with Britain providing a base for operations, American air power is successful due to the short distance from England to Germany. On the other side of the world, the situation is very different. In the Pacific, aircraft with a greater range are needed in order to attack the heart of Japan. It is this geographical requirement that calls for the construction of a design that not only delivers tremendous firepower, but ensures that it reaches its target there and back safely. Operation Matterhorn, the secret plan to bomb the Japanese from China. Approved by President Roosevelt, it is in these pages that the urgent need for the Superfortress is born.
The initial requirements, simply as I recall them, were a 5,333 mile range, and I don't know why that odd number, a 2,000-pound bomb load, and I think the speed that they specified was something like 273 miles an hour or something. Those were the basic requirements.
A unique organization, the 20th Air Force, is formed, headed personally by Hap Arnold, to see over all B-29 operations. All the military needs now is for one company to step up. Unlike the military-industrial complex of today, during the 1930s, aviation companies are hesitant to get in bed with the government to make military planes.
Companies that could easily be producing military goods, such as aircraft factories, were reluctant to convert their plants for military production because they weren't sure how long hostilities would last.
In an era of neutrality acts and cynicism towards any signs of war profiteering, only fixed-price contracts are given by the United States. Under these rules, the developer must put forth their own money towards the design with no guarantee of a deal being signed. And with technology becoming more complex, signing on to the B-29 is like playing Russian roulette with your company's future. It is a large risk, one that the giants of aviation are not willing to take. As one Boeing employee said, "There was no sound of coin in Uncle Sam's jeans. His pockets only carried marbles and chalk." With most manufacturers losing money during this period, few were willing to step up to the plate.
The military production in which U.S. workers were engaged in 1940 and 41 as part of the effort to support the Allied forces helped to pull the United States out of the Depression. Lots of people were back to work, and what that meant was that they had disposable income. Many manufacturing firms did not want to convert to military production because they were eager to take advantage of that consumer dollar that was now available.
Douglas, a rare company to turn a profit during the Great Depression, is avoiding the super bomber project like the plague. After having their arms bent by the government to develop the B-19, they reported losses of more than $2 million. Not wanting to be fooled again, their submission for the contract is nothing more than a slightly modified version of that same bomber. In government circles, there is great concern. If Douglas is only putting forth a minimal effort, it is apparent that they are not interested. Lockheed, another manufacturer, is still a young company and a question mark at best. Boeing, having lost money on the B-17, would have gone bankrupt had the government not bailed them out in 1940. With only 2,000 employees, they, like others, want to stick with what is known and proven, instead of venturing out into the uncertain. Surprisingly, they submit their design, and it is accepted.
Boeing had a tremendous reputation on the basis of the B-17. And when you think about the Pacific now, it would have been impossible for B-17s and B-24s to fly those distances in the Pacific.
And so the makers of the Flying Fortress begin the project in haste, starting work on a plane that is built before it is even designed.
You would always like to build a prototype airplane and fly it and work the bugs out before you commit production of the airplane. In this case, the Air Corps made it known at the very onset of the program that they were going to buy production quantities of airplanes before the prototype ever flew.
Certain sections of the aircraft are constructed before detailed designs of other parts are even sketched out. They begin a long and painful journey to build one of the greatest airplanes ever. Boeing decides that the B-29 central nervous system is to be based in America's heartland, Wichita, Kansas. A small city of just 120,000 people is chosen as the site where the Superfortress is to be built.
Why Wichita specifically? There are a couple of reasons for this. If you look at a map of the United States, you'll see that Wichita is just about in the dead center of the country. Also, unlike some other cities in the state, like Kansas City, Wichita had a very tiny proportion of foreign-born residents. Some government officials were concerned that immigrant workers would be more inclined to participate in labor agitation, might be more inclined to come from a socialist or communist tradition, or in some cases might be allied with Nazism.
Hundreds of miles away from America's vulnerable coasts, and a farming population familiar with machinery requiring less money to live on, Wichita is ideal for Boeing. Expansion is a necessity, and the city is eager to accommodate both the government and Boeing during the war years.
The Great Plains region mobilized to lobby to bring industry to their area. The state of Kansas organized an industrial development commission in 1939, and in fact, the governor of Kansas went to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of his state, arguing that Kansas was safe from invasion. It had lots of natural resources, such as oil, gas, and coal, and it had a large supply of pragmatic farm boys.
And so begins an assembly line of epic proportions. A similar system that Henry Ford used to make Model Ts in Detroit, Boeing is using to make Superfortresses in Wichita. Grandmothers, who never wrestled with anything more intricate than a wood stove up until 2 years ago, are building Superfortresses at Wichita. What is true at Wichita probably applies equally to other major production units of the B-29 program. The Superfortress truly can be said to be a product, as President Lincoln said, of their government. That is, of, by, and for the American people. Quoted from the New York Times. With a small army of workers, over 60% of the aircraft is fabricated on the spot. Unfortunately, one plant cannot do the job alone. The outsourcing of the B-29's many parts are done in cities such as Marietta, Georgia, Omaha, Nebraska, and the home of Boeing, Renton, Washington.
There were something like 764 airplanes on order before the B-29 ever flew. Those airplanes were going to be built by 3 companies in 4 plants. Boeing was going to build the airplane in Wichita and Seattle, the Renton plant, Bell in Omaha, and Martin in Marietta, Georgia. So production was committed before the airplane ever flew, and it was a high-risk program, recognized as a high-risk program from the very beginning.
It is a project coming from every corner of the country, a true testament of America's industrial strength during the Second World War. As the B-29 is constructed, one notices that it is not revolutionary but evolutionary. A true sign of the times, with militaries thinking bigger is truly better. At the beginning of American war production, the average aircraft weight is estimated to be just over 3,000 pounds. 4 years later, that average is shot up to over 10,000 pounds. With this plane's massive size and potential, it comes as no shock that its supporters are eager to get up in the air as soon as possible. Although the enthusiasm for the B-29 is strong, the call for a plane of this magnitude is easier said than done. Being twice the size of the B-17 and requiring double the horsepower, completing it is no easy task.
It was a big jump from, let's say, the B-17 for people who were in the 17 that went to the 29, and it was one very big jump for us who went from the B-25 to the B-29. It was monstrous.
You had tremendous power in 4 engines compared to the B-17. And I flew the B-29 up to 40,000 feet, whereas the B-17 would barely go to 30,000.
Before being put into production, 10,000 drawings are sketched of a prototype, costing the government over $3 million. with it needing to be rushed only adds to its growing list of future problems. Its main flaw is its complexity. With a need to fly at extremely high altitudes, a pressurized cabin is desired, so its crew are not required to wear masks in the air.
It was the first pressurized airplane, one that I'd ever flown. I think it was the first thing after the B-17, the B-24 that came along that had a pressurized cockpit, which made flying at altitude far more comfortable than unpressurized, of course.
You kept your oxygen mask handy just in case you lost your pressurization, but it was very comfortable. It was a big relief, much easing of strenuous activity on the part of the whole crew.
Also, with 4 extremely powerful engines and over 60,000 different pieces needed to assemble just one plane, this project is turning into one giant jigsaw puzzle.
So the airplane that got submitted had grown from an 85,000-pound airplane to something around 110 or 111,000 pounds.
In addition, an enormous amount of material needed. 27,000 pounds of aluminum, 5,000 pounds of rubber, 10 miles of wiring, over 1,000 pounds of copper and brass, and nearly 2 miles of tubing are needed to make this monster. To some, this is becoming a case of the United States biting off more than it can chew. Despite the best efforts of its designers, engineers, and workers, the B-29 is encountering numerous problems. For a population of 120,000, putting together a 120,000-pound Superfortress is a massive undertaking due to its workforce's relative inexperience. Recruited from the ranches and farms of the Great Plains, these men, and now women, have not been properly trained for a task of this magnitude. What normally takes years to learn, they must master in just months. While in flight, as is the case with Lockheed's Constellation, overheating is becoming the norm.
Some of the engine problems that were there were things like overheating of the engines. Early on, we had problems, again, with propellers that would overspeed, wouldn't govern properly, wouldn't feather properly. We had problems with the carburetors. The engines would backfire.
During one test flight, a B-29 crashes, killing the entire crew, including Eddie Allen, Boeing's chief test pilot. Despite these deaths and setbacks, the project must continue. For America's top generals, the B-29 is becoming a race against the clock. With air bases being built in China, the expected arrival of the Superfortresses is scheduled for April of 1944.
I understand, because of an agreement between Roosevelt and Chiang Kai-shek, that these airplanes were going to be in China a year before they were. So the rush would get them out of the country.
The crew at Boeing, however, is nowhere near completion. Despite this harsh reality, one man, General Hap Arnold, does not throw in the towel. Writing to fellow General Curtis LeMay, he proclaims, "The B-29 project is important to me because I am convinced that it is vital to the future of the Army Air Forces. More concerning are the project's economic costs. By the end of development, testing, and production, the government is estimated to have spent over $3 billion on the Superfortress, a third more than what is spent on developing the atomic bomb." For these generals, it is not only militarily vital that the B-29 succeed. Financially, if the model fails, billions will be lost.
Well, when I got to Wichita, I found out they weren't flying them because the Boeing company had taken this position that the airplane was no good and they weren't going to make them. I understand, secondhand or third, that General Arnold told Boeing officials, "You're going to build that airplane or give us back $50 million we've already advanced for its being." They thought real quick. They said, "Well, we'll build the airplane, but we won't take any responsibility for it." Arnold is reported to have said, "You don't have to take it. The Army Air Corps will take that responsibility."
These ongoing problems become crystal clear in March of 1944. Hap Arnold, on an inspection mission, asks how many are ready for shipment to India. Due to the complications in its design, he is shocked when Boeing's answer is 0. It is for this reason there lies an insurance policy, a backup, a contingency plan in case Boeing fails. And for this possible savior, the American government goes to the other 3 giants of aviation, companies that designed their own version of the Superfortress. The B-30, 31, and 32 can hopefully come to the rescue if all else fails. At least, that is what the government hopes. Lockheed, with their B-30, represents only a token effort. Many are unsure if they can carry through on a project of this magnitude. The plan to make their Superfortress a gigantic bomber version of the Constellation goes nowhere. Their main priority is given to the Connie, which makes it up into the air nearly a year and a half before the B-29 does. The situation is identical at Douglas. Their B-31 design never sees the light of day. Of its 3 competitors, only one gets a plane up in the sky. Consolidated, makers of the B-24 Liberator. They, like Boeing, are commissioned to evolve their design with the B-32, known as the Dominator. Weighing 50 tons, possessing a speed of over 300 miles per hour, and containing 4 2,200 horsepower engines, the aircraft appears to be a carbon copy of the Superfortress.
The B-32 was an outgrowth of the B-24, like the B-29 was an outgrowth of the B-17.
And just like the B-29, the Dominator suffers from the same technical problems. The program is almost canceled in December of 1944 due to development being severely behind schedule. By the end of the war, only a handful of B-32s fly over the Pacific, conducting mainly reconnaissance missions.
The B-32, I had one there at Bomber Test. I flew it. It had no distinctive advantage over the B-29. Matter of fact, I had to order my test pilots to fly it. They didn't much care about flying it.
The key advantage for Boeing is its will and determination. With countless man and woman hours put into this project, combined with billions of dollars in funding, they are determined to complete it no matter what the cost. Being so far along with its development, they must see it through.
The aircraft plants in Wichita adopted suggestion systems where workers could offer suggestions for how to improve efficiency and productivity and actually get cash awards if their ideas were selected by management and then implemented. Many of the amenities that employers offered to workers, like cafeterias, in some cases child care centers, and so forth, were specifically designed to improve productivity and decrease absenteeism rates.
War production is the foundation of our war effort. And by the same token, what you do from day to day affects your country's success in this war. Never forget, you are working for him, for the youth of America, for the boy next door. On the last day of the last war, thousands of such boys were killed. If the war had ended 24 hours earlier, they would have returned. What you do tomorrow, today, in the next hour, can help to bring the last day of this war closer and to save lives that would otherwise be lost. We are all in this together. You and I, your own boy, and the boy next door. Our job is not finished. Let's finish the job together.
With a gun to their heads, the people of Kansas come together and begin rolling Superfortress after Superfortress off the assembly line.
In the essence of wartime conditions, you overcame absolutely any obstacles. It may have taken only 1/10 the time, that it would take to solve a technical problem in peacetime. But under wartime conditions, you know, if you can't solve it with 10 engineers, get 100, and that's what the contractor did.
When Arnold, in a fit of rage, demands that 175 B-29s be on time for delivery, this almost impossible task is miraculously accomplished by the people at Boeing, Wichita. Working around the clock for 4 straight weeks, 600 workers meet this goal. Compared to a grand total of just 4 in August of 1943, by February of 1945, Boeing Wichita produces 100 B-29s per month. With 20,000 man-hours, these workers are able to produce 4.2 Superfortresses a day, a shining example of both their patriotism and dedication. Until the end of the war, production is right on target. On June 5th, 1944, from an Indian airbase, the first B-29s take to the sky. It has been a strenuous journey, as the aircraft has traveled more than half the world to reach its target. 10 days later, under the 20th Bomber Command, headed by Hap Arnold, 47 Superfortresses depart from Chengdu, China, and begin bombing Japan mercilessly. For the next year, the B-29 becomes the primary tool of destruction in the Pacific. With the Japanese already in a weakened state, they simply cannot compete with this advanced super bomber. Things only get worse as the Americans capture the Mariana Islands. With a shorter range to Tokyo, these strategic outposts do nothing but accelerate B-29 activity over the land of the rising sun. Day after day, Japan is bombed into submission. Led by General Curtis LeMay, his strategy of bomb them and burn them is proving effective. Cities the size of New York, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh are being decimated. LeMay even remarks that by mid-1945, they are going to run out of targets to bomb. That dilemma is solved on August 6, 1945. A B-29, the Enola Gay, flies over Hiroshima, Japan, carrying an atomic bomb on board. The order to go nuclear is given by President Harry Truman. The effect of this new weapon forever changes the way wars can now be fought. The results are devastating. An estimated 80,000 people are killed from the first atomic bomb.
I had seen the city perfectly visible as a place where a lot of humans were moving about. You could see it. You see movement. But when I flew back by it and I was out the co-pilot's window, I look at it, all I saw was something that reminded me of a boiling pot of tar.
3 days later, another superfortress, Boxcar, drops a second atomic bomb on the city of Nagasaki, killing tens of thousands more. These 2 attacks, in addition to the Soviet Union's declaration of war against Japan, finally causes this once proud nation to surrender unconditionally.
Aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, on Sunday, September the 2nd, 1945, the most horrible war in history came to its complete and formal end. Foreign Minister Shigemitsu signed for Japan. Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander.
The B-29, with its years of development and construction, proves its worth to the American military. For it is truly the bomber that made the difference.
It's my personal opinion, and I'm sure I'll find detractors, that the B-29 won the war, World War II, in the Pacific.
Oh, I think without a doubt, when you consider particularly the Pacific War, it was a key point in winning it.
And so the people of Wichita, the people of Marietta, the people of Omaha, and the dozens of other towns and cities that contributed to its production go back to their regular lives. Boeing, with no more orders from the government, lays off 70,000 workers at the end of the war. The service they have done for their country, however, does not go unnoticed.
I think historians would argue that war production in the United States was pivotal, if not decisive, in the war effort overall. The United States, over the course of the war, spent more than $50 billion on Lend-Lease aid to the Allies. By 1944, U.S. factories were producing a ship a day and a plane every 5 minutes. But that's a phenomenal amount of production.
In the B-29's history, the men and women in these plants are just as important as Hap Arnold, Curtis LeMay, and those piloting the aircraft.
It's a joint effort of everyone. The maintenance, the supply, everyone contributed to it.
For a 3-year period, of the over 3,000 Superfortresses built, 1,600 of them come out of Wichita alone. On August 29th, in a statement to Boeing employees, General Arnold proclaims, "Thanks to what you did, our combat crews had been trained and B-29s were ready and waiting to occupy Iwo Jima, Saipan, and Okinawa as each base was prepared to receive them. You were given a job to do, and the way you finished that job met our greatest expectations. For myself, and on behalf of the Army Air Forces, I say to you, well done, and thanks from the bottom of my heart." The Superfortress should be remembered as the greatest roll of the dice in American aviation history. In an era where aircraft manufacturers had little to gain with costly military projects, it is amazing that it was able to get into the skies as quickly and efficiently as it did. The race for the Superfortress is also truly an American story. Its industrial capacity and strength, a supply line uninterrupted from bombings and destruction, and a diligent and patriotic workforce is what made the B-29 possible.
Out of just such an eruption of the Earth 1 million or more years ago was born Japan, land of the little people who grew to believe that in blood and iron lay the shortcut to greatness. Land of philosophies and religions stranger than their names, like Bushido, the medieval code of slicing a victim with a samurai sword. The truth of that one they were to discover. Old Japan was primitive. The history of the new Japan is a story of successful copying. On a tradition of peace and love of the soil, the new Japan suddenly turned its back and copied our locomotives, our planes, our great ocean-going liners. Even Tokyo might have been transplanted bodily from the Western world. Japan's plans for world conquest were financed by the fine thread of an industrious caterpillar, woven into silk and stamped "Made in Japan" for its English-speaking customers. Soft silk sent away for hard scrap iron to be forged into weapons and returned to us eventually in hate. How will it end for the little people who wanted to enslave the world? The answer to that was to come like the answer to all things, from the sky. Only when it came, it was to be stamped, "Made in America," as it was, for instance, on Doolittle Day, when the Hornet, the first Shangri-La, pointed her prow right at the heart of Tokyo. This was the first brief answer to Japan that came from the skies. It was not to be the last. General Doolittle vowed,
"We're going back to Tokyo, and we shall go in full array and with mighty allies."
a weapon was ready. Through these forbidding doors, ceaselessly, day and night, come trains bearing the materials that skill weld, forge, and rivet into an instrument dedicated to the destruction of the enemy. This is only one of many plants that one day appeared where just the day before, it seemed, was pasture land, or the place where they were building washing machines. When the workers reported for the first time, few of them guessed the exact nature of what they were building. They knew that a giant plane would result, but beyond that it was largely conjecture. But then the day came, inevitably, when the pieces of their jigsaw began to fit together. The day when the mountains of material and the millions of man-hours all combined to confirm the assembly line rumor, the washroom gossip, and their honest-to-God American curiosity. They were building the mightiest aircraft in history. They were building a plane for the Army Air Forces that would reduce the huge fortresses of liberators to medium bombers. They were building the Boeing-designed B-29 Superfortress. And this is how they built it. Enough aluminum is stored here to lay a silver carpet over every street in Tokyo. Aluminum sheet to be brought to life by these machines and the workers who operate them. They give it shape and personality. Their stamping machines, their presses, lathes, and drills coax it and pound it and pierce it into the multiple patterns prescribed in 50 tons of blueprints. It was bauxite a month ago, dead in the ground. Miners dug it out of the Arkansas hills. And then in some distant factory, bauxite came in at one end and aluminum sheet rolled out the other. One day from now, in the stratosphere above the clouds, it will mirror the sun. In a month, out of the ground and into the sky. These will be the wings to take it there. From the confusion of manpower and equipment within this massive jig will emerge the fabulous 117, a wing of completely new design, which will carry more weight, faster and higher than any other wing. The jigs themselves, the fixtures and the tools were designed so that unskilled workers could be expert with them in a week, whether they were farmers or clerks, cotton pickers or housewives, salesmen or ex-soldiers. The wing is of awesome weight and dimension, yet a girl can lift it, with about the same effort that she would need to adjust the flower in her hair. Space and the handling of bulky parts have always been problems in assembly production. The engineers who designed this plant solved both problems at once with a few strokes on their drafting board. They moved traffic to the ceiling. Thus, they allowed workers more time at machines, and machines more time at work. Here is the wing in a more advanced stage. If the workers imagined for a moment that they were in a shipyard, it would be understandable. The Mayflower was shorter from stem to stern than each of these wings from tip to tip. All the pilgrims who landed at Plymouth Rock could curl up within the gasoline compartments in the wing and sleep no less comfortably than on their long Atlantic crossing. Each of these nacelles will encase an engine of 2,200 horsepower, 4 of them,
harnessed to one Superfortress, 8,800 horsepower. What does that mean? Horsepower means more than 300 miles an hour. Horsepower means flying high enough to see all the New England states at once. Horsepower means victory in the air. When these skeleton nose sections are enclosed in aluminum and glass, they will be the most comfortable cockpits a bomber ever had. The windows cannot cloud or frost. The pilot's instrument panel is less complex than the dashboard of an automobile. Soundproofing allows talk without the interphone. And because the entire compartment is a pressurized tank, the air remains practically constant from prairie level to the rarefied atmosphere over the Himalayas. Back of the control cabin is the huge center section. Here the wings will be set. Here the bomb bays will hold the greatest weight of death ever lifted into the skies. Toward the tail, another big pressurized chamber will house the rest of the crew, except the rear gunner, who has a cabin to himself. If in some stratospheric emergency a crew member must travel between front and rear pressurized compartments, he can slither through this connecting tunnel. An Arnold glass observation blister. Durable, crystal clear, eyes of every Superfortress. The prefabricated sub-assemblies are manufactured by other contractors and shipped to this plant by the carload. What has been shown here is being duplicated in plants all across the country. Identical miracles of modern machinery, nursed and tended and made productive by people who look and think like these people. The fair, the dark, people with deft hands and unblinking eyes, the strong with their willing muscles, and those less strong but as willing, the braided schoolgirls, the white-haired grandmothers, the old young, the young old, the little ones and the less little ones, working together in intimate harmony. Their product, death. Their goal, peace. These workers are the lucky ones who see the finished product of their labor roll off the line. Every hour of every day, they are witness to this awe-inspiring ceremony, this tremendous wedding of material and man-hours, this climax in the history of man's conquest of the air. But what of the others who helped, however remotely, to create an aerial weapon they have never seen? The lumberjack who felled the trees that became the blueprints of the B-29, the bauxite miner in the Arkansas hills, and the miner of iron and coal, the builder of guns and engines, propellers, the grimy, sweating men who cast the cylinders and forged the crankshaft, the maker of tires, electrical equipment, instruments and safety wires, the citizens who paid for the Superfortress with their purchases of war bonds. Theirs are isolated lines of effort, initiated all across the land and converging eventually beneath this vaulted roof. Here, the sum of their energies assumes shape and stature and meaning. Here is the final meeting of every effort and every part. A bold insignia will proclaim to the enemy that this is the proud new weapon of the United States Army Air Forces. But it is our plane, too, because we, the people, built it. We conceived it, financed it, gave it wings. We powered it and armed it, and our sons and brothers fly it. The function of the people's superfortress is to break the race who turn their backs on reason, to spin them around to face the peaceful way of living. It is the people's answer to all the sneak raids, all the death marches, all the stabs in the back. It is our memorial to the fighting men who were not afraid to die, who fought with their lives the time we needed to make the weapons to win the war. Like this weapon, which 50 hours after its test will be landing in India or China or some other faraway Shangri-La to regain its breath before the final assault for which the people destined it. Within the plant, work proceeds, but the workers cock their ears for a sound that regularly drowns the clatter of their tools. It is more than a sound. It is a song. This is the song they hear. The story begins in 1939, when the far-sighted Army Air Forces said, "We want a plane for our defense that can fly a bomb load thousands of miles out to sea and return." After 6 months' work, there was a tiny model which spent the next 6 months in a wind tunnel. And then there was a full-scale model which was subjected to every punishment man could devise for it. Only after a year of such tests did the Air Forces let contracts for planes that would be built to fight. The B-25 Mitchell is a big, strapping bomber, 67 feet across the wings, but it could reach Japan only if it took off from an aircraft carrier. Much bigger is the famed B-17 Fortress. 104 feet from wingtip to wingtip, it has ranged 1,400 miles over Japan's island conquest. But it cannot reach Japan itself from any base we now hold. The Superfortress, wingspan 141 feet, longer than the Wrights' first flight through the air at Kitty Hawk. Range, altitude, and bomb load, secret, though the Air Forces do say of them laconically. Very long, very high, and very large. Because it is a global bomber, around it has been built an entire new Air Force, the 20th. The 20th War Theater is the world itself. Its operations room is the war room of the Chiefs of Staff in Washington. Its planes will be treated as a major task force, in the same manner as a naval task force is directed against a specific objective. Watch it come in for a landing. A revolutionary set of flaps that constitutes nearly 1/5 of the wing area gives the ship a low landing speed and a shorter landing run than many a plane half its size. All this great weight of Superfortress is supported by a tricycle gear whose tires require less pressure than a child's bicycle. Somewhere in Western China, 500,000 nameless people wrote their magnificent chapter in the saga of the Superfortress. 2,000 years after their ancestors built the Great Wall for the defense of China, these farmers transformed saturated rice paddies into airfields for offense against a new invader. They had no machinery as we know it, only their million hands, and a searing memory of anguished years since Japan set out to annihilate them. And soon there were runways to bear the weight of a whole fleet of superfortresses. Revenge for the nameless people was close at hand. Even in China, land of miracles, the arrival of the Superfortress is an occasion for everyone to turn out in curiosity and in welcome. A welcome now, but journey's end on the other side of the globe is only the beginning of another, grimmer journey. The tanks will have to be filled, the engines given a final check, the guns armed, the bombs set in the racks, and then briefing. And the assembled airmen will listen to words that a few years ago would have been fantastic, but today roll casually off a briefing officer's lips. The target, gentlemen, is Japan.
You still fall for that old gag?
Yeah. Hi, Jim. Good afternoon, Captain. You better call me Dick. We're going to be doing a lot of talking in the next few hours. Fine, that suits me. Let's have a look at the weather. Weather good. Clear and unlimited. Yeah, I know. Looking forward to your first ride in the B-26, Jim? Certainly am. See, it's a break getting into your flight. I've been promoting ever since I first saw you in pre-flight school. Took some doing. Thanks. I hope I'll be a credit to you. Better be. Remember in college when I was your student instructor in math? I took a lot of trouble with you, Dick. If you're as dumb as I was, I'll wash you out. There she is. Where's the checklist, Corporal Smith?
Sorry, sir, I forgot it.
It's our engineer. He's almost as green as you are.
Me, green?
Had 80 hours of twin engine school. I'm almost ripe enough to be picked.
What I can understand is how year after year the Air Corps keeps getting them so young and innocent.
Here's the checklist, sir.
Take a look, Jim. Since you're going to be a B-26 pilot, that's your Bible. As far as you're concerned, life begins with the checklist. And it may end if you don't use it. The checklist is first in war, first in peace, and the first thing you reach for in a B-26. Understand? No, you take it. I want you to make this check yourself. We'll do the before entering airplane check. Take over.
Left landing gear and wheel well check.
Well, that U-lock the crew member's removing is a safety precaution we have to prevent anyone from raising the landing gear while the ship's on the ground. You don't mean to tell me that's ever happened. That and worse. Now get on with that checklist and see that none of those other things ever happen to you.
Tire for blisters, cuts, proper inflation, slipping on rim.
Notice the red mark on your rim. That'll show you if your tires slip.
Oil strut for proper extension.
correct? That's right. And maybe here's where I'd better do a little pointing out. There's your gear-operated load and fire valve piston. Make sure it's fully extended. Check brake for excessive heat, right? Check your brake shuttle valve for looseness. The hydraulic lines for excessive leakage. Down lock pin engaged. Let's go. This is the camera door. Check ballast for proper loading. You must have sufficient ballast back here in order to have a stable airplane. In this case, it's sandbags instead of guns and ammunition, but the weight must be there, whatever it may be. Without the sandbags, the nose is very heavy on landing, and it's impossible to keep from beating up your nose gear. Here's your fire extinguisher. See that it's in position and properly secured. What do we check on the putt-putt? Make sure the equalizer switch is off, and see that all cushions or parachutes are away from the muffler. They might start a fire. That's right landing gear and wheel well check. You do that yourself, exactly the same as we did the left. Oh, there's the red signal on your Lux fire extinguisher. That's a quick way of knowing from the outside that the extinguisher has not been discharged. Inspection of the nose gear, same as that of the main gear. Go ahead. Corporal Smith, will you get in the cockpit and operate the controls for us?
Yes, sir.
Now, this next check is to make certain that we always have free and maximum movement of ailerons, elevators, rudder, and attached trim tabs. I'll give the commands to Corporal Smith for operating the controls, and you go back in the rear and check they're working properly.
Full left rudder.
Full right rudder.
Rudder trim tab to hold full right rudder.
Now all the way left. Turn the wheel all the way left. Now all the way right.
Aileron trim tab to lower right wing.
Now all the way to lower left wing. Stick all the way back. All the way forward.
Elevator trim tab wheel all the way forward.
Now all the way back.
Get all trim tabs and take off position.
Flaps all the way down. Flaps in takeoff position. Flaps all the way up. All's well with the flipper, Skipper. Good. Incidentally, you always taxi with your flaps in the up position. Did you personally check the air pressure in the emergency bomb bay bottle?
Yes, sir. It was 1,800 pounds.
How were the batteries on the pre-flight inspection this morning?
They were well charted, and I entered the readings for the emergency bomb bay bottle and the batteries on Form 1A.
Good. Have one of your men get in and get ready to start the putt-putt.
Yes, sir.
You understand the purpose of the putt-putt, don't you, Jim?
Yeah, it gives it right here on the checklist. All engine starts will be made with an auxiliary power plant or an external source of electrical power except in emergency. Conserve electricity until after takeoff.
And that's really important. You don't want a heavy drain on your batteries until after your engine-driven generators are putting out continuously. And that won't be until you're flying. Putt-putt will also come in handy in flight if your generators ever cut out on you.
That putt-putt seems practically indispensable.
It is.
Whenever anybody on the ground uses any electrical equipment, the putt-putt must be kept running to keep the batteries charged. That's law, like always using a checklist. You must have electricity for the takeoff, especially for the electric props.
Well, that's how most runaway props occur, isn't it?
Yeah, run down batteries. Only we don't call it a runaway prop. It's really an overspeeding engine running away with a fixed pitch prop.
Let's see. This is the after entering airplane section. Check flight hydraulic servicing can for full service. Tap it on the side to see if it's full. Then fuel transfer valves. They're in the forward bomb bay.
Fuel transfer valves off. Fuel transfer pump off. Fuel valves on, both of them. Hydraulic tank fully serviced. Bomb rack switches on tanks, if extra fuel tanks are carried. On bombs, if no tanks are carried. In this case, we're carrying an extra fuel tank, so it's on tanks. The rest of the stuff is in the navigator's compartment.
Generator switches off. Check pressure, emergency brake air bottle.
That's there under the navigator's table. I check that the valve is open as placarded. And make sure that this bleed valve up here ahead in the cockpit is closed. That's it. Here's your emergency hydraulic tank. Make certain it's fully serviced. Check your hatch hinges and emergency release handle. See if they're in position. Okay. Close them up. Check your safety pins in place. Give me some pressure on the hydraulic hand pump so I can set the parking brake.
How long do I keep this up?
You can't pump anymore. Till the hydraulic gauge shows the pressure's up. That's okay now. Take a look outside. If it hasn't been done within the previous hour, both props are turned over by hand 2 or 3 revolutions with the ignition off. Just to clear out any oil that may have settled in the lower cylinder. You've been in the Air Corps long enough, Jim, to know the importance of checking Form 1A. No red diagonals, gas, wing tanks, and 1 bomb bay full, oil full, no other remarks. What's your serial number?
918162.
Say that or dial it. Leave your inner side earphone off so we can hear each other.
Let's see. Next is the starting engines check.
Yeah, watch me. Throttle 1/8 open. Cowl flaps open. Wing flap control up. Landing gear control down, lock on. Supercharger low, guard over controls. Oil shutters open. Carburetor air cold. Primers off until actually starting engine. Fuel booster off until ready to start engine. Nose gear emergency control normal, up. Main gear emergency control normal, up. Mixture idle cutoff. Propeller controls, high RPM, forward. Selectors automatic, safety's on. Feathering normal to the rear. Battery switches both on. Master ignition switch on. That's the emergency bell button there. On the ground, we use that as a signal to the crew member in the rear to start the putt button. By cutting your battery switches for an instant, looking at your landing gear position indicators, you can tell if your putt-putt's putting out juice. Main inverter switch on. Spare inverter off. Magneto switch on. I'm going to start the left engine first. Clear.
Clear.
Here's how we get them started, Jim. Starter energizing switch on for about 30 seconds. Booster pump on. Primer on for about 5 seconds. Then I press the engaging switch. Now it's your job to shove the mixture control to auto rich the moment the engine fires.
Auto rich it is.
As soon as the engine's running, throttle back to between 800 and 1,000 RPM till it's warmed up. You'll notice your oil pressure goes up to around 200 pounds. Don't get the oil pressure within 15 seconds, stop the engine and investigate. Wonderful. You're learning.
Auto rich Anthony, they call me.
Okay, now you can turn your boosters off. You'll know your motors are warmed up when the oil temperature gauge hits 40 degrees. The oil pressure drops suddenly to normal. The cylinder head temperature gauge will read from 100 to 200 degrees. They're okay now. Then you hit your emergency bell button again. That's a signal to the crew member back there to shut off the putt putt and get out of the airplane. We don't turn on the radio until we're ready to taxi out. It's the co-pilot's duty to handle radio conversation. Tower from 7645 on south end of ramp, ready to taxi out for takeoff. Go ahead.
7645 from the tower. Ready to taxi to the north end of the north-south taxi strip and stand by for takeoff. Go ahead.
7645, roger. Ready to go, Corporal?
Okay, sir.
One thing you must always remember is that you're in a ship with a tricycle landing gear. The nose wheel must never be turned to an angle of more than 40 degrees to either side. Did you see that red sign on the nose wheel when you inspected the well?
Yes, I did, Dick.
You'll notice it's easy to taxi the ship, and there's no need for taxiing fast. In making a turn, always keep the inside gear rolling. Never bring it to a complete stop, as is often done in airplanes with conventional gear. And keep your eyes open on the ground or in the air. It isn't the airplane, it's what you hit with it. When you park, always make certain that your nose wheel is straight ahead. Otherwise, running up your separate engines, the airplane has a tendency to turn in the direction in which the nose wheel is cocked. The thrust of one of the engines might damage the nose wheel assembly. Corporal Smith is checking now to see if the nose wheel is straight. I get you, Captain. Next is the engine run-up and prop check, one engine at a time. Push it up till it's doing 2,000 RPM. Different engines have slightly different manifold pressure readings. Is that the RPM at which you check the max? Yeah. Look at your checklist. That's first. I'm sorry. Watch your propeller selector switch and decrease RPM, and watch how the RPM falls off on the tachometer. As soon as you see it drop, return the selector switch to increase RPM, and notice how the tachometer shows increase back to 2,000. Do you hear how the sound of the propeller changes? You can hardly miss it. That's right. Put your propeller selector switch in automatic, and test your propeller pitch control handle. Pull it partway back until the RPM decreases 200 revolutions, keeping your eye on the tachometer. Then push it forward, watching the tachometer to see that it returns to 2,000 RPM. The next step is to throttle back to 1,400 and do the same thing with the other engine. Now you run your engines up together to about 1,800. At the same time, checking your manifold pressure against the RPM. Be sure that both engines are putting out approximately the same power. Corporal, check the generators. If Corporal Smith finds the ammeters are showing more than 10 amps difference, we'll give this airplane back to the crew chief. Generators are okay. Oil temperature is 60 to 80. Oil pressure is 75 to 85. Next. Fuel pressure with booster pumps off, 15 to 17. Check. Turn the boosters on. Yeah. Should be 12 to 17 pounds now. Check. Takeoff checklist next. Right. Check instrument panel for placarded operations instructions. Cowl flaps, open for all ground operation. Wing flaps, down 1/4 to 1/2 as required. Remove landing gear control lock. Supercharger low. Oil cooler shutters, open except during extremely cold weather. Carburetor air control, cold. Hydraulic pressure, 750 to 950 pounds per square inch. Booster pumps on. Primers off. Nose gear emergency control, normal up. Main gear emergency control, normal up. Mixture control, auto rich. Propeller controls, high RPM, forward. Propeller switches, selector, automatic. Safety on, feathering normal. Batteries on. Are the generator mainline switches on, Corporal?
Generator's okay, sir.
Don't start takeoff with cylinder temperature about 205 degrees centigrade. Rudder and aileron tabs on 0. Elevator trim tab a few degrees tail heavy. Screw in position for takeoff. All set, Corporal?
All set, sir.
Now you have definite duties during the takeoff. Watch the tachometer and see that it doesn't exceed 2,600 RPM. Your right hand should be bare and ready to handle the propeller switches. Your left hand is used to raise the landing gear. Here's how you put your hand. By keeping your right hand down on the quadrant, you can keep the throttles from creeping back during takeoff. If your tachometer should show an increase above 2,600, say 2,880, put your propeller selector switch in fixed pitch position. Then hit your feather switch for about 2 seconds, being sure to return it to normal position. That's the procedure for correcting an overspeeding engine. The other emergency procedure to be prepared for is a decreasing RPM prop. Your props will be in automatic position, which is normal for takeoff.
So if one of them shows a decrease RPM, put the selector switch in increase position and bring the RPM back to 2600. Then leave your selector switch in fixed pitch position. Understand?
Yeah. Now, under no condition, retract the wheels until you get a definite signal from me. My hand will be on top of the throttles, and this will be it.
Roger.
Okay, call the tower.
Tower 7645, north end of north-south taxi strip, ready to take off. Go ahead.
7645 from the tower, stand by. Ship landing, go ahead.
7645, Wilco.
Watch this ship coming in. Give you a chance to see a normal B-26 landing.
Notice his nose drop. He's putting his flaps down now. As soon as they're down, he'll check his hydraulic pressure to be sure he has brakes. He establishes a glide of 140 miles per hour and holds it till he gets almost to the ground. Then he flares and comes on in normal landing. See how he holds his nose wheel high and lets it down easy before he loses airspeed control. Then he applies his brakes gradually and turns off the runway. Get the idea?
I think so. Shall I call the tower?
Yeah.
Tower 7645. Is it clear to take off? Go ahead.
7645 from the tower, you're clear to take off to the south on runway 14. Go ahead.
7645, roger.
I'm going to take off with 44 inches manifold pressure and 2600 RPM. That's minimum. But if you need it, the manifold pressure can be pushed up to the red mark at 49 inches on this particular model. Once the roller started, you use very little brakes to keep the ship straight. Lateral control should be maintained by the rudder only after you're a short way down the runway.
As soon as you can, get the nose wheel off and hold the ship at a slightly nose-high attitude. When you have enough speed, the ship will take off by itself. You don't have to pull it off the ground. And it's got very little torque. You could pull it off at about 110 miles per hour if you were on a short field.
It'll fly itself off at about 130 miles an hour.
I'm throttling back now to normal rated power, which is 38 inches of manifold pressure. Give me 2400 RPM on the propeller pitch control. 2400. What were you watching during the takeoff?
Tachometer, manifold pressure gauge, and your thumb.
You ever get to be a B-26 pilot, don't waste any time giving the signal to get that gear up from the moment you're sure you're off the ground.
Because
when you run out of runway, your landing gear is no good to you. Pretty tough getting to 160 miles per hour till that gear's tucked away.
I see what you mean.
Well, we're climbing now. We do that at exactly 160 miles per hour until the flaps are raised. The airplane should be at least 800 feet above the ground before you raise it. This is what is known as milking them up. You do it a little at a time, and you keep your hand on the flap handle until the flaps are all the way up. If you don't, and they should come up on one side only, you'll go into the most violent panic you ever saw in your life. But you can stop it by putting the flaps back down again.
Can I take my eyes on the tachometer?
Yeah. Put them on the hydraulic controls. It's time to neutralize them. All air work is done with cowl flaps, wing flaps, landing gear, and oil cooler shutters in neutral position at all times, in order to prevent loss of hydraulic fluid from the entire system in case one of the individual lines develops a serious leak. Turn off your boosters.
Airspeed indicator says we're picking up speed.
With the flaps up, the ship changes its attitude. You'll notice our noses come up a bit. It gains about 10 miles per hour. With the cowl flaps half closed and the oil cooler flaps half closed, It streamlines the airplane to the extent that it picks up about 5 miles per hour more. But you must not forget that these controls should be handled in accordance with cylinder head and oil temperature.
Really claws her way right up into those clouds, doesn't she?
You fly her for a while, Jim. Get the feel of the controls. See how easily she handles.
Nice.
Try some shallow dives and climbs, a couple of gentle turns. Controls are easy, aren't they?
Smooth as a GI haircut. Easy to coordinate, too.
There you're skidding, sonny boy. Take a look at that turn and bank indicator.
What causes that?
Something I forgot to tell you. The plane has a very sensitive rudder, and you'll skid on all your turns if you don't correct for them. Try it again. Another advantage of the B-26 is that it can be dived up to 325 miles per hour with a heavy load and pulled out without an appreciable strain on the airplane. But diving is about your one luxury. Side slips, vertical banks, and all acrobatics are prohibited maneuver.
I'll try to go straight and level, Dick.
Try a 40-degree bank. That's the maximum. By the way, the B-26 is a good airplane to go to war in. It's got plenty of power, plenty of armor plate, and plenty of guns.
I'm beginning to think it's a good plane to go anywhere in.
Let me take over for a minute. I want to show you a power-off stall. Power-on stalls are prohibited in the B-26. This one will be with the nose not over 10 degrees above the horizon. She stalls at about 125 miles per hour with the flaps and landing gear retracted. About 115 miles per hour with the flaps down, and about 100 miles an hour with flaps and landing gear down. Notice the pronounced shuddering just before the stall. You'll also feel the lack of control when the control surfaces are moved. These are important points to remember, since it means that the airplane will always give you plenty of warning. Another advantage is that it falls straight forward from this type of stall with no tendency to drop off on either wing. Of course, in power-on or nose-high stalls, it may fall off on one wing. Normal stall recovery is very simple. Just put the nose down and let the ship pick up speed by itself. Loading is an important consideration in respect to stalling. If the ship is improperly loaded, the tail is too heavy and therefore the center of gravity too far to the rear, it will affect the stalling characteristics of the airplane by making it stall at a higher speed and with less warning. Improper loadings also have to put you into a spin.
That spin business fascinates me. Just how do you get out of one?
Cut your power off and make a normal spin recovery. Don't be slow and cautious in the movement of your controls during recovery. And avoid getting impatient waiting for the controls to take effect. Sometimes they need a little while before they begin to work. The only way you can judge time is by counting the number of turns made. Don't use your throttle except as a last resort. When you're free of the spin, pull out gradually or you're apt to tear your wings off.
What about mental spins? How do I pull out of them?
About time we were heading for the barn. But before we do, I want to show you how this airplane flies on instruments. See how our gas is.
that B-26 moving in on us.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on him. Transfer gas to the main tanks. I'm going on instruments for a minute, and I want you to keep your eye on that B-26 from my side while I'm flying blind.
Yes, sir.
Hand me the blind flying hood. Watch that 26 from your side, Jim. I'm going to let down to 4,000 feet to show you how easy it is to set a constant rate of descent in a B-26. You're watching the instruments?
Them and that 26.
Nose down slightly and trim. Check airspeed. What's the fuel pressure? 0. Flip on the booster.
No rise in pressure. The field's inside. Do you think we can make it?
I think so. I'm going to feather that dead engine. Watch me. The ignition switch is left on until the propeller has stopped turning. I center my ball and needle and slow up to 155, increasing my trim as I do.
It's not a lot of trim, Dick.
You need it because of the natural torque of the operating engine. Going on the right engine requires about 5 degrees more trim than if you were going on the left. The slower I go, the more trim I need. But I've got to watch that needle and ball while trimming. What's the airspeed?
155.
Between 150 and 160 is correct. 155 is plenty fast for single-engine operation.
Shall I give him the bad news back at the tower? Tower from 7645. I'm about 8 miles west of field, 4,000 feet, operating on a single engine. Request instructions for emergency landing. Go ahead.
7645 from the tower. The field is clear for emergency landing. Wind is south 10. Go ahead.
7645, roger. running a little short of altitude, are we?
I guess I'd better hit the emergency salvo release. I didn't expect to have to demonstrate these emergency procedures so soon. The drag increases when the bomb bay doors are open, so I had to nose down slightly to hold 155. How much altitude did I lose?
250 lovely feet.
I'm going to make a 90-degree approach, Tim. With all turns into the good engine. Turns made into a dead engine are invitations to a spin. Plenty high, so nose down slightly. Reduce right engine for about 24 inches manifold pressure. Landing gear down and check your instruments.
Gabriel didn't blow his horn.
Check your hydraulic pressure gauge. I've got the nose down again to hold 155. You're on the field side, so you'll have to tell me when to turn.
I can hardly wait. Now's the time, Dick. But you're plenty high, you're certain to overshoot.
That's the whole point of this type of approach. Always overshoot, never in any circumstances undershoot. You can always dive off excess altitude. The next step is to decrease the power on my operating engine until it's virtually shut off. And then trim a few degrees to the other side. One-quarter flaps. One-half flaps. What's my airspeed?
155.
That's minimum for this kind of a glide.
4 flaps now?
No, not until I'm positive I'm going to overshoot. Okay, full flaps. I picked up some speed on my dive, and I'll have to lose it by holding the nose up and letting the ship scoot. Once she's on the ground, notice how straight she rolls. No tendency to ground loop.
Boy, these brakes are really good.
You can stop her at 1,500 feet.
Very interesting, Captain. I hope you committed that reasonable facsimile of a single-engine approach to memory.
I certainly did. Say, by the way, what would you have done if you'd had to stop in a hurry and didn't have any hydraulic pressure?
I'd have had you give me more pressure on the hydraulic hand pump. If that hadn't worked, I'd have pulled the emergency air bottle, which is connected directly with the brakes.
Well, that's the fastest stop you can make, huh?
No, there's an even faster one.
If you're going to run into something or the field is slick and you can't get any traction on your wheels, you can, as a last resort, pull back your mixture controls, cut your switches, and raise your landing gear. That'll stop you, but it's a little hard on the airplane.
Just one more question, Dick. Suppose we hadn't been able to make our home field.
We'd have picked out any field that was fairly flat and free from obstructions, brought the ship in on its belly. Aside from the wheels being up, the landing would have been the same as the one we made.
I know, but what about getting out?
Well, if we'd had time, we'd have got out of our parachutes and pushed the seats forward to get out of the path of the propeller in case one of the blades should break off when it hits the ground. Then just before we touched, I'd have pushed the mixture controls back to idle cutoff, cut the switches to keep down the fire hazard. And the minute she touched, we'd have got the top hatches open, and then we'd have all got up and quickly walked away.
Come in.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, sir. I have an emergency landing to report.
Yes, the tower informed me you were coming in, and I watched you. It was a good job.
Thank you, sir.
Those simulated single-engine approaches you've been making came in handy for you, didn't they?
Yes, sir. The airplane was undamaged, and there were no personnel injuries.
What was the reason for the engine failure?
It was a personnel failure, sir.
No. Sit down.
Corporal Smith, our engineer, made a mistake in turning on the fuel transfer pump, emptying the left main tank instead of filling it. However, it was more my fault than his because I had him watching a nearby plane while I flew on instruments, and I neglected to keep an eye on my fuel gauges.
And where were you? Sandbagging in the co-pilot seat, sir.
Sandbagging is right. That's another lesson for your collection, Captain. Live and learn, and I hope neither of you will forget it. I'm positive that Corporal Smith, or rather Private Smith, will not, since he's going to get some KP duty in which to meditate upon his sins. How do you like the B-26, Lieutenant?
I'm not kicking, sir.
Only our enemies are.
This is it. This is the B-29, the plane you've been waiting for. And it was worth waiting for. It's the biggest, fastest, mightiest heavy bomber in the world. It can travel farther and higher than anything else on wings. It has a pressurized cabin, permitting high-altitude flight without oxygen masks. It has 5 remotely controlled, electrically driven turrets, each carrying twin 50s, with a 20-millimeter cannon added to the turret in the tail. Yes, the B-29 is everything you've been promised. And the pilot who flies one has an enviable job. Important, glamorous, and tough. Here's a B-29 pilot. He's measuring the distance between pin centers on the left landing gear. This part of the job isn't so glamorous. But it's the pilot's responsibility to make sure that everything on this biggest bomber in the world works properly. If you were a B-29 pilot, Here's exactly what you'd have to do before an operational flight. Check the nose wheel. See that the tires are inflated to 45 to 50 pounds per square inch. While measuring the pressure, look over the tires for general condition also. Watch out especially for cuts or signs of serious wear. One of the ground crew will replace the dust covers, but you're still responsible for his work. After you've measured the pressure in both tires, give the gear a visual check. The strut should be clean, with a clearance between pin centers of 10 inches. And the shimmy damper must be full. That's important. Make sure the rod is almost up to the notch in the gauge on the shimmy damper reservoir. Now you can look over the engine cowlings on your way to the other main landing wheel. This gets the same inspection you've already given its mate. The co-pilot ducks into the wheel well to inspect the equipment there, while you work on the wheels. Measure tire pressures again. On these tires, the pressure should be between 75 and 85 pounds per square inch. Inside the wheel well, the co-pilot examines the wires, connections, and switches. He makes sure all the cannon plugs are on tight, paying particular attention to the plugs on this motor, which opens and closes the nacelle doors, and also to the plugs of the normal and emergency landing gear motors. Then he turns around to examine his side of the strut. He looks it over and inspects the brake lines, making sure that the hose is not chafing and no fluid is leaking. Meanwhile, you're checking the clearance between pin centers again. 13 1/4 inches. Right. Now, are the wheel chocks in place? One behind the inboard tire and one in front of the outboard tire, just as it should be. Next, check the cowlings, inspection doors, and inspection plates. You've already examined some of them, but you must be sure all of them are okay. The other members of the crew help you out with these inspections. Here, for example, a gunner tests the fastening of the top cowling. But you'll have to check the security of the other coverings, and there are a lot of them all over this ship. While you're walking along, you can examine the wing seams. Fluid leaking from them means trouble. Now to check the ailerons and trim tabs. All control surfaces and all trim tabs must be inspected. Test the tabs for excessive hinge play by shaking them, and see that the gas tank caps are tightened. If there were extra fuel tanks in the bomb bays, their connections would have to be examined. But now the pilot and the co-pilot continue their tour around the plane. They have a lot to check. Hatches, windows, control surfaces, trim tabs, inspection plates, and doors. But the pilot and co-pilot aren't the only crew members with inspections to make. The gunners, for example, besides helping the pilot check the airplane, must also be sure the guns and gun cameras will work properly. They must inspect all 5 turrets in the same way they're now examining this lower rear turret. After they have the dome and gun cover removed, they see that the ammunition moves freely in the chutes and is correctly loaded. The guns just don't fire with the cartridges in backwards. They also check the safety wiring on the gun mounting bolts, up in there. Then the gun charging switches are put on reset. That conserves the CO2 pressure, which automatically charges the guns. Finally, the gun camera is inspected. Enough film, speed set at 16 frames per second, lens adjusted to the brightness of the day, and the interval control put at the desired number of seconds and turned on. And this turret is all right. The dome and gun cover can be replaced. The tail turret is checked by the tail gunner. But again, the pilot is responsible. If the guns fail, he gets the blame. So he watches the tail gunner as the Shatterall feed mechanism is inspected. Now the other gunners only have to lock the latches. Elevation latch locked. Azimuth latch locked. The doors are shut and fastened, and the gunners can go to another turret. And there's still more work to be done. Each engine must be pulled through 15 blades, with only 2 men per blade. The engineer takes care of that. He sits at his position, making sure that all switches are off, while the 4 engines are pulled through. And now the co-pilot puts on his clothing and collects his equipment before joining the rest of the crew for inspection. Notice that the crew members wear fatigues while making their inspections and change into flight clothing only when they are ready to enter the plane. The examination of the exterior of the airplane is completed, so the crew can fall in for the check of their personal equipment. That's the last item of the before entering the airplane part of the procedure. And it's strictly the pilot's job. Your job. You are responsible for the men as well as the plane. If they fail, you're at fault. Each crew member must have his electrically heated flying clothing, parachute, oxygen mask, knife, a quart of water, and Mae West. Steel helmets and flak vests are already inside the ship at the positions. Apparently, these men are completely equipped. But don't think they only have to climb into the ship and fly away. There's a lot yet to be done. Let's go along with the pilot again and see what he has to do to take a B-29 into the air. He climbs in through the hatch in the nose wheel well. That entrance is also used by the co-pilot, engineer, navigator, radio operator, and bombardier. There's work for every man before the engines are started, during engine starting and warm-up, before takeoff, after takeoff, and then a whole list of additional things to do before landing again. As soon as the radio operator gets in, he climbs back to close the pressure door between the forward compartment and the forward bomb bay. The bombardier is the last one in, so he closes the hatch. The gunners close the pressure doors in their compartment. They also open the cabin pressure valves, which will now automatically maintain the cabin pressure at the desired level. 3 compartments in the plane, the pilot's compartment, the gun control compartment, and the tail gunner's compartment, are sealed off from the rest of the fuselage and supplied with this compressed air. The cabin pressurizer keeps 8,000 feet altitude inside the plane until the outside is at 30,000 feet. If the plane gets higher than 30,000 feet, the pressure inside drops off gradually, but it is always 13.4 inches of mercury more than the outside pressure. But let's get back to flight procedure. The gunners take care of the other pressure door in their compartment. But what about the pilot? That's you. You already have your chute fastened, your Mae West on, and the seat adjusted. So you put your throat microphone and earphones on. If you put the mic on first, you won't get so badly tangled in the wires. Don't forget to plug in your disconnector cord. Now to start work. Ask the engineer for Forms 1, 1A, and 01-1-40, and look them over. Be sure that everything on Forms 1 and 1A has been checked. Pay particular attention to the list of defective equipment. If anything vital is out of order, it must be fixed before taking off. The weight and balance computation is in Form 01-1-40. That's important. Make sure it's correct. When you've examined all the forms and signed them, you can give them back to the engineer and tell him to start the putt-putt. You have to turn on the emergency ignition switch. The tail gunner looks after the putt-putt, starting and stopping it on orders from the engineer. But now, you set the jackbox selector switch to command and turn on the proper command receiver and the command transmitter. This puts you in communication with the control tower. Now examine your own equipment. Look over your oxygen mask and make sure your portable oxygen bottle is fully charged. Then try out the cockpit lights. To test the ultraviolet lamps, turn on the switches and twist the shutter. You should then be able to see the light. By turning the shutter back, you can control the amount of ultraviolet light emitted. Next, try out the alarm bell. The gun commander will tell you if it's working. Then depress the brake pedals and pull out the parking brake knob to set the brakes. Look over to the control stand and make sure that the emergency releases and switches are correctly set. Power transfer switch, emergency landing gear release, emergency bomb release, emergency cabin air pressure release, and pilot's over control. Now unlock the control surfaces and throttles by moving the locking lever on the aisle stand full forward. Then release the throttle brake and test all 4 throttles through their entire range. Take it easy, move them slowly and gently. All controls on the B-29 should be handled in this careful manner in order to prevent damage to the mechanism. There's no need to push hard. And the co-pilot doesn't just sit and read the checklist. He must test the action of the control surfaces, moving each surface, elevators, ailerons, and rudder through the complete range. The gun commander looks from his blister, observing the response of the surfaces, and reports to the co-pilot. A similar test is made on the trim tabs. The co-pilot turns the 3 control wheels as far as they will go in each direction. That big wheel on the side of his control stand operates the elevator tabs. The aileron and rudder wheels are on top of the control stand behind the throttles. The way the trim tabs follow the setting of the control wheels is also observed by the gun commander, who tells the co-pilot over the interphone how the tabs move. The co-pilot turns the tabs back to neutral after testing them. And now to try out the wing flaps. But first he calls the side gunners on the interphone to make sure none of the service crew will be in the way of the descending flaps. When the gunners report that it's safe to go ahead, the co-pilot presses the flap switch to the down position and holds it there until the flaps have been lowered 15 degrees. 15 degrees is enough to tell if they're working all right. The co-pilot can't see the flaps, of course, so he watches the wing flap position indicator. But the gunners can check visually. They tell the co-pilot if the flaps come down all right. So now he can bring them back up. The gunners, again, will tell him when they're up. Don't start thinking the gunners have nothing to do but watch control surfaces and flaps. They have their own checklists to follow. The right side gunner, for example, is looking over his supply of spare lamps and fuses. Yep, that's okay. But now you, the pilot, are almost ready to start the engines. See that the automatic pilot master switch is off. Check over the 4 sets of control surface adjustment knobs, making sure all their pointers are up. Then set the manifold pressure selector to the 0 position. And depress all 4 propeller RPM switches to the increased position and hold them there until the lights on the co-pilot's instrument panel flash. Now you're all ready to start the engines, and the rest of the crew should be too. They check in with the co-pilot, reporting in this sequence. Bombardier, who sits directly ahead of the pilot and co-pilot. Navigator, who is some distance behind the pilot, facing forward. Flight engineer, who is directly behind the co-pilot, facing aft. Radio operator, who sits across from the navigator and faces the right wall. Gun commander, who is in the top of the fuselage amidships and can face in any direction. Left gunner, who faces aft. Right gunner, who also faces aft. And the tail gunner, who stays close to the putt-putt during takeoff and landing. His combat position, of course, is in the tail. Everybody set now. Warn the service crew outside you're going to start the engines and tell the engineer to start number 1. And number 1 engine spins twice. And now he turns the fuel boost pump on, closes all the throttles except number 1, sets the fire extinguisher to number 1 engine, presses the starter switch to energize, and then flips it to start. And finally turns the magneto switch to both. You have to push the throttle to 1200 RPM and signal for number 2. The same procedure is repeated until all 4 engines are running. Now that the engines are going, vacuum pressure is available to operate your gyro flight instruments. So the gyro compass and the flight indicator can be uncaged and set. The co-pilot will be doing the same with his gyro instruments. Next, see if the other vacuum pump is working all right. Have the engineer switch to the pump on the number 2 engine. The vacuum may drop some, but it should go back to about 4 inches. Now you can call the control tower on the command radio. It's already on. This is about the right time to get your taxiing instructions, since you'll soon be ready to move out to the runway. At the same time, ask for the field barometric pressure so you can adjust the altimeter. It must be set carefully to the correct pressure, in this case, 29.84 inches. Obviously, an accurate altimeter is a vital necessity, especially if you may have to fly on instruments. Next, you want the bombardier. You know he sits back with the navigator and the radio operator until the ship is in the air. But right now, he has to come forward to make the final checks on the bomb sight. He's already completed the regular pre-flight inspection of his equipment. All he must do now is see that the bomb sight is entirely ready for takeoff. The directional clutch should be disengaged and the secondary clutch engaged by turning it clockwise. Then the drum wheel must be turned counterclockwise as far as it will go. That does it. He's all set to take off. And now you're ready to close the bomb bay doors. Ask the ground crew outside if there are any obstructions underneath the plane. Everything's clear, so you can order the bombardier to close the bomb bay doors. He throws the door switch while you look back through the pressure door to watch them shut. The rear bomb bay door is looked after by one of the gunners, who will tell you when it's closed. When both doors are shut, the bombardier can go back to his takeoff position in the rear of the compartment. And you're almost ready to taxi. But you better make one last check of the turret warning lights. Uh-oh, that lower rear turret light is on. Call one of the side gunners and have him take care of it. Perhaps the turret wasn't stowed. Forget about it, gunner? Well, it's easy to fix. Get control of the turret, press the action switch, and stow it. That does it. There, that turret warning light is off now. And everybody's set. Switch your jack box back to command and signal the ground crew outside to remove the wheel chocks and get a safe distance away from the airplane. The co-pilot warns the crew to stand by to taxi. And you can release the brakes and move the ship out to the runway. While taxiing, or whenever the plane is moving, all crew members watch from the windows and keep the pilot informed of obstructions. The gunners can provide the most help since the blisters give them a wide view. This is a big airplane. It's mighty easy to hit a fuel truck or another ship and clip off part of the wing or stabilizer. And that doesn't help the flying characteristics a bit. Notice the flaps are kept in the up position. If you taxi with them down, the undersurfaces are likely to be damaged by pebbles blown back by the propellers. After you've stopped at the edge of the runway, put in your call to the control tower for permission to taxi on the runway. When the tower has given the clearance, move on the runway. Steer with the outboard engines, not the brakes. Excessive use of the brakes on a plane as heavy as this one will wear them out quickly. As the ship is turned around at the far end of the runway, notice again how the engines are used for steering. You can see the right propellers moving faster than the left. When you're at right angles to the runway, stop for the engine run-up. Tell the flight engineer to get ready to make his magneto check while you run the engines up, one at a time. First, press the propeller RPM switches to the increase position, holding them there until all the propellers are at maximum RPM. Next, turn the manifold pressure selector to position 8. With the knob in this position, the superchargers automatically provide military power. Now, advance the number 1 throttle, but slowly and gently, to 2,000 RPM. Hold this speed until the engineer tells you the magneto check is finished. Then press the propeller RPM switch to the decrease position until the tachometer drops about 200 RPM. Now flip the switch to the increase position and hold it there until the light on the co-pilot's instrument panel flashes, and then push the throttle to full open. The tachometer should show about 2,600 RPM for the number 1 engine, while manifold pressure should be around 47 inches. To see if the turbo is working properly, turn the manifold pressure selector towards 0. That should make the manifold pressure drop. The turbo's okay. Bring the throttle back to idling, around 550 to 600 RPM, and increase speed to 1,200 to avoid fouling the spark plugs. Next, start on the number 2 engine. This same procedure is repeated for each engine. Now you're about set to take off. After you're cleared for takeoff, turn the plane the rest of the way around so that it points down the runway. And stop again while the co-pilot lowers the wing flaps about 25 degrees. He can tell when they're right by looking at the wing flap position indicator. And the gunners can check on the accuracy of the indicator by watching the flaps from their blisters. They report on the approximate flap position over the interphone. When the co-pilot tells you the flaps are okay, fasten your safety belt and set the manifold pressure selector to position 8. Next, set the propeller RPM switches to increase RPM and wait for the lights on the co-pilot instrument panel to flash. Then warn the engineer to be ready for takeoff. Stand by for takeoff. Now you push on the brakes, hard, and open the throttle slowly until the manifold pressure gauge reads about 40 inches. Then release the brakes. As you gather speed, slowly advance the throttles to full power and set the throttle brake. Manifold pressure should go up to 47 or 47.5 inches. RPM should go up to 2,600. Continue accelerating down the runway until the indicated airspeed gets up to 95 miles per hour. Then slowly pull the control column back, putting the ship in a flying attitude. The plane takes off without further action on your part when it gets flying speed. The exact speed at which it will leave the ground depends on the weight. When the ship is airborne, apply the brakes to stop the wheels, and then have the co-pilot retract the landing gear. He has to hold the landing gear retracting switch in the up position because the switch is spring-loaded. The co-pilot makes sure the nose gear is up by looking through the inspection door on the floor of the cockpit, just ahead of the aisle stand. The wheel is there, all right. At 160 miles per hour and 500 feet altitude, the co-pilot retracts the flaps, snapping the switch on and off until the indicator shows that the flaps are all the way up. The side gunners should be watching from their blisters as the plane takes off. They tell the co-pilot when the flaps and landing gear are up. Now you ought to change from takeoff power setting to climbing. Adjust the manifold pressure selector until the manifold pressure drops to 43 inches. And decrease propeller RPM to bring the tachometers to 2,400. You can order the engineer to have the putt-putt turned off now and tell the bombardier to come forward and take his combat position in the nose of the ship. If this is an operational flight and enemy opposition is expected, have the men put on their flak vests. These vests are made of small overlapping links of tough steel sewn inside canvas. Quilting on the inside of the canvas provides further protection and also cushions the shock of impact. Above 10,000 feet, oxygen masks must be worn by one man in each compartment. When you reach the desired altitude, level off and tell the engineer to set up cruising conditions. First, you move the throttles back to about 65% of full power. Individual manipulation of the throttles may be necessary to keep each engine at the same manifold pressure. Now you adjust the propellers and manifold pressure, so turn the controls over to the co-pilot. Start with the props. Press the propeller RPM switches to decrease and bring all 4 propellers to 2,000 RPM. Then turn the manifold pressure selector down until the manifold pressure drops to 30 inches. The needles should stay together in this case. There you are, 30 inches. Considerable juggling of throttles, propellers, and supercharger may be necessary before you get it just right, but that's how you get a B-29 into the air. It's a big, heavy, and powerful airplane. Bigger, heavier, and more powerful than anything you've ever flown. For that reason, it must be handled gently and precisely. You must carefully follow the prescribed procedures. Even a super bomber is no good to the Army if it's in little busted-up pieces. But don't get jittery. The 29 is a sweet ship to handle. When it stalls, the nose drops so that the plane automatically recovers. There is no tendency to spin. Stalling speed varies quite a bit naturally depending on weight and other conditions, but generally it's between 84 and 135 miles per hour. When turning or executing any maneuver, take it easy. This is a big plane, remember, not a fighter. Yet fairly steep turns can be made safely. This 30-degree bank can also be done with full flaps. That's about the limit. And when evasive action is necessary, you have plenty of tricks to pull. Just watch this B-29. And the B-29 does more than just fly well. It packs a terrific wallop. A wallop enemy fighters will quickly learn to fear. That turret you see moving is only one of the 5 on the ship, which mounts a total of 10 machine guns and 1 cannon. 4 of the turrets, 2 on top and 2 beneath the fuselage, can turn through 360 degrees in azimuth, 90 degrees in elevation. The tail turret is more restricted in movement, but it has a 20-millimeter cannon in addition to the twin 50s the others carry. But the big thing about the 29's armament is the fact that the gunners don't touch the guns. The guns are controlled remotely from special sights, and any gunner can fire almost any turret. For example, one side gunner might have control of 2 turrets, firing 4 caliber 50s at his target. That's only the beginning of the story about guns, so let's get back to what a pilot has to do. Now you're ready to land. Since you've descended below 10,000 feet, remove your oxygen mask. Tell the co-pilot to take over control of the ship so that you can get out of your flak vest. The vest is easy to take off. Just pull on the cord and it drops away. This speed of removal becomes important if you ever have to bail out, since the vest is worn over the parachute and, well, you figure it out. If you've been riding with the automatic pilot, turn it off. You can't use it for landing, of course, or when taking off, flying turbulent weather, or setting trim tabs. The co-pilot should now warn the crew to prepare for landing and tell the bombardier to climb out of his seat in the nose and get in back with the engineer. Then the co-pilot has the engineer start the putt-putt. You check the turret warning lights. All the lights are off. Then call the control tower and get landing instructions. At the same time, ask for the field barometric pressure and set the altimeter to correspond. Now the co-pilot hits the brakes to test the hydraulic pressure. Both normal and emergency systems should have 800 to 1,000 pounds. To find out about the emergency pressure, you have to ask the engineer. At the same time, you can see if he's ready to land and get his log. He has calculated the new weight and center of gravity, since you've used up a lot of gasoline by now. You should look the log over, but the co-pilot will check it carefully, examining the center of gravity and weight computations. The table on the instrument panel gives the stalling speed for the computed weight. The co-pilot tells you the stalling speed and also reports that everybody in the crew is ready to land. Next, you adjust the propeller RPM switches. Push them to increase until you get the tachometers to show 2,100 RPM. Now adjust the manifold pressure selector to give you plenty of reserve power. Turn it all the way up to position 8, the setting for full military power. When the plane is slowed down to 180 miles per hour or less, order the co-pilot to lower the landing gear. When the switch is set to the down position, the wheels descend all the way, lock, and the gear motors automatically stop. When the left and right gear are down, the side gunners, who should now be watching the wheels and flaps, will report to the co-pilot. He himself can make sure the nose wheel has been lowered all the way by looking through the window in the floor of the cockpit. Next, the flaps should come down. If you've been in combat, the co-pilot should lower them first only 5 degrees. If they were damaged, lowering them all the way might rip them off the wing. The gunners can look them over and report on their condition. The flaps are all right, so the co-pilot can lower them 25 degrees. Notice that he snaps the switch on and off. That way, the flaps descend gradually, and a sudden change in the lift characteristics of the airplane is avoided. The gunners will report when the flaps appear to be down 25 degrees, and the co-pilot can check by looking at his wing flap position indicator. When he has the flaps where he wants them, he'll tell you. Then you'll probably have to reset the trim tabs because of the change in the flap position. Next, adjust the throttle brake to a comfortable tension. And don't forget to turn off the detonator power switch. Now make a standard approach, keeping the speed about 30 miles per hour above stalling. And on the final approach, order the co-pilot to lower the flaps all the way. When you touch the ground, the plane should be slightly tail low and going between 95 and 100 miles per hour. Notice how the main wheels bear most of the shock of landing. Then the ship slowly settles forward. Don't apply brakes immediately. Let the plane lose some of its speed rolling. Then turn the manifold pressure selector all the way back to 0. You won't need the turbos anymore. And set the propellers at increase RPM. Raise the flaps now while you're taxiing and have plenty of power. You're down now. You've followed your checklist step by step. But there are other checklists, the engineers, for example. So suppose we go back over that landing procedure and see how the engineer's checklist fits in with yours. 5 minutes before landing, the engineer tells the tail gunner to start the putt-putt. The ship enters the traffic pattern at a 45-degree angle to the downwind leg. Altitude is 2760, speed is 180. Here the co-pilot lowers the wheels. The mixture controls are set to auto-rich, and the cowl flaps open 15 degrees. At the end of the downwind leg, the speed should be about 140 or 150, and at least 3 generators must be on. The co-pilot lowers the flaps 15 degrees. After the pilot makes the procedure turn, the altitude should be 2260 feet. The co-pilot lowers the flaps to 25 degrees. The pilot sets the manifold pressure selector to position 8 and adjusts the propellers to 2100 RPM. Just before the final turn, the engineer checks the magnetos and turns the boost pumps on. Around the turn, on the final approach, speed should be at least 140, altitude 800 feet. Also, 6 generators should be on. Finally, the co-pilot lowers the flaps all the way and calls out airspeed and hydraulic pressure as the ship descends to the runway. After the airplane's on the ground, turbos come off and propellers are set to full increase RPM. The engineer switches the boost pumps off and opens the cowl flaps all the way. All right, we're back where we were before. Tell the bombardier to come forward and open the bomb bay doors. The doors should always be kept open when the ship is standing still to prevent the accumulation of gas fumes. Next, turn off all the switches. Then you can get rid of some of your equipment that remains inside the ship and climb out for the after-flight inspection. Yes, you start with an inspection and finish with an inspection. If there was anything wrong, now is the time to find out about it. And now is the time to correct it.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth, and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the Dronescapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.
There was a time when many believed that sitting at these controls meant you were sick of life. This aircraft was called the Widowmaker, and the saying, "one a day in Tampa Bay," became common. Despite its reputation as a pilot killer and 4 official inquiries about canceling the project, the plane outlasted those doubts and achieved an unparalleled safety record. The Martin B-26 should be remembered not for its early reputation, but for proving itself as the top medium bomber of its era, the Marauder.